It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice right here, right now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. We're going to tackle a few different topics, I think, that are worthy of discussion. Because as we move down time, the timeline, we are seeing a significant growth in political hate speech. When I say that, I'm referencing specifically Governor Cuomo's quote the other day, in which he basically stated that the people who are in the city of New York or the state of New York, if they are right to life and pro-assault weapon and anti-gay, they have no place in the state of New York. Now, with all due respect, that is a statement that is fascist in its origins, and it unveils the mask of every individual that is of that mindset. Let me clarify for you what I mean by that. And then before we go there, our second topic is Google, who got a $21 million tax break in the same city, while simultaneously this governor is throwing the citizens out who don't agree with his political philosophy. Our third topic is going to be 85 people who have the net worth, the equal net worth of the bottom 3.5 billion people on the planet. And we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm not one of those income equality people, but there's something seriously wrong when 85 people have the equivalent net worth of the bottom 3.5 billion people on the planet. Our fourth topic, and this one will outrage every American, is Kelly Thomas, who died at the hands of murderers. Essentially, this is so disturbing, essentially permanently emplacing the police state as an institution in our nation. And so the basic overall concept of today's program is the rise of fascism in America. Now, let's start with our first topic because, and by the way, if you'd like to call in, we added our new phone lines. You're welcome to do so. You can call the 417-204-5141. And we've put a new phone system in that, assuming it goes without hitch, should be able to take your call and put it on the air. You know, Cuomo's statement is unbelievably fascist in its origins. He actually believes that as the governor of the state of New York, he has the right to represent only those citizens of the state who agree with his political philosophy. Now, I've been saying to you all along, and I've been saying this for a couple of years now, that as we descend into a state of fascism, you will begin to see the masks come off. And you're beginning to see the examples of this in situation after situation, case after case. Because this kind of talk, and many, many other things that are happening in our country every day, the Obamacare debacle, the IRS being used as a weapon of mass destruction against individuals and organizations that have a political philosophy that is not in line with the military junta that is currently in power here in the United States of America. And I do declare this to be a military junta. You may have a titular head who is an inept boob for all intents and purposes under the guise of Obama. But let's make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen. We are now under a military junta of fascism. The military aspect of this is the police state that we live under. And when you start hearing people talk, reminiscent of the kind of dialogue that was utilized in Italy and fascist Germany prior to World War I, and you see a governor who openly comes out and makes a statement that he does not represent anyone who is not in line with his philosophy relating to pro-life or pro-gun people or anti-gay. You see, it's not so much what you believe, because that's really not what's important here. What is important here is the understanding that you have a right to believe whatever you want and be adequately and equally represented in an objective fashion by the individual, in this case, Governor Cuomo, who represents the state in which you live. If you are oppressed in the very first instance by a tyrant like Cuomo because you have a political philosophy that falls outside the boundaries of what he believes, ladies and gentlemen, no one should have any doubt about where this is headed. Now, with all due respect, every self-respecting American of any and all political persuasions and beliefs should either be leaving or demanding the resignation of this fascist tyrant. No excuses, no compromises, no quarter asked, and none given. You see, here's where we are. What Cuomo has accomplished, what he's stated, is a hate crime against the people of the state of New York. And I'm using their terminology, not mine. What he has said is equivalent to a hate crime. In no uncertain terms, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't a question of a statement that anyone within the boundaries of New York should be willing to accept. His statement, it doesn't just unmask the tyrant. What it does is it clearly draws the lines, and it exposes the individual who is, for all intents and purposes, guilty of a crime of malfeasance and a hate crime of state treason against the electorate in his own state. He condones a $21 million tax break against against the statements of his own city assessors for Google. And in the opposite side of that same declaration, he declares that anyone who is outside of his political philosophy and believes in pro-life and pro-gun constituencies have no place in the state of New York. That's a crime of criminal malfeasance for a politician, because you were elected to represent all people, not just those who agree with your political philosophy. And to demean and to attempt to sway public opinion by making such a declaration is a high crime of treason against your own state. Every citizen of New York, the entire state, should be demanding that the federal government immediately charge him There's no investigation necessary. His statement is open for anyone to hear. We don't need a long-winded investigation by the Department of Justice and a friendly investigator appointed by Eric Holder. What we require are federal charges of a crime of treason and a crime of malfeasance, a hate crime against the citizens of the state of New York. It's inconceivable that America would allow this level of criminality in its midst, this level of lawlessness, this level of fascism. You've heard me say it many times before that fascism is a merger between corporate and political interests. And if you look at the definitions and the concepts of what constitutes that level of treason, you'd recognize that when you have a governor on one state who is, for all intents and purposes, declaring Kristallnacht. Did you hear what I just said? He is declaring a Kristallnacht against pro-life and pro-gun constituencies. There's no excuse for that. In fact, there's no justification or rationale that one can use that would quantify or allow that. This radio interview he did, and of course he's going to come out and he's already tried to backtrack it. You know, state Republicans have blasted his comments in an article in the New York Post, or reporting by the New York Post, even as the governor was trying to step back from the comment. But you see, the comment itself is a declaration of the mentality and the philosophy and the attitude and the implication of exactly what this tyrant is looking for. The letter that they've put out in an open defense says it is clear that the governor was making the observation that an extreme right candidate cannot win stateside because this is a politically moderate state, either moderate Republican or moderate Democrat. With all due respect, you can't write enough letters. There's not enough fancy words to cover the statement that he made. Here's what he said. The problem is not me and the Democrats. Their problem is themselves. He was referring to the Republican Party and the split in the Republican Party where conservatives are working against moderate Republicans. Who are they, he says? Are they these extreme conservatives who are right to life, pro-assault weapon, anti-gay? Is that who they are? Because if that's who they are, and they're the extreme conservatives, they have no place in the state of New York, because that's not who New Yorkers are. It is the most prejudicial, the most vile and demeaning statement that I have ever heard from a politician. And he needs to be held accountable, criminally, politically, and civilly. And anyone who is willing to accept that and not demand repercussions is clearly flawed in their thinking. Hannity came out. He lives in New York. Sean Hannity, I'm talking about. He lives in New York, and of course he works at Fox News, which is based in New York. And he made the following statement. Governor Cuomo, I'm going to leave, and I'm taking all my money with me, every single solitary penny. And by the way, Governor, because I work here, there's a whole bunch of people that work for me and benefit because I do 2 different shows. And I guess maybe some of them will be out of work. I'm sure you'll take care of them, Governor. Glenn Beck has posed the question as to whether or not the governor believes that there are two classes of citizens. He says, and this is his statement, we are fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, entrepreneurs, dreamers, visionaries, hard workers, straight, gay, black, white, believers, non-believers, liberals, and conservatives. More importantly than any one of these labels, we are decent and kind human beings and upstanding, loyal, patriotic Americans. We don't see things as left or right. We see things as right and wrong. Our organization creates jobs for hundreds of people in your state and provides news, opinion, entertainment, and a helping hand for millions of people across this country. Are our contributions, tax dollars, and genuine goodness as citizens not welcome here? We respectfully request an answer on whether there are two classes of citizens. With all due respect, and I applaud Beck and Hannity for coming out and making a clear and bold statement. But the truth is, that's not enough. That's not enough. What Cuomo has done here is not bordering on the criminal. It's way over the line. If we are willing to accept this kind of statement, if we are willing to accept this philosophy, if we are willing as a nation to accept this level of tyranny from the chief executive officer of an entire state, and one that is as crucial to the economic backbone of America as New York, one that is a state where industry is one of the key components of the manufacturing, of the service industries, of the financial industry of our nation. If we are willing to accept that, if we are willing to accept this level of thinking from a politician and merely ask for an apology, we are finished as a nation. It shows that we have completely and utterly failed to police our own citizenry, police our own garbage. The state of New York should be charging the governor, as we speak right now, with treason, a high crime and misdemeanor. A high crime because he has clearly made it evident that he has no respect for anyone and no longer therefore represents anyone who has a political philosophy and ideology that is even remotely different from his. If you're going to try and tell me that a person who is, for all intents and purposes, pro-life, a pro-gun constituent, someone who believes that the gay lifestyle is wrong, is become an enemy of the people, then we don't have a nation under the rule of law anymore. We have already descended into tyranny and fascism. Every political persuasion, every individual within the state of New York should be clamoring, and I'm telling you, the entire state should go on strike and sit down and say, no more work, no more taxes, no more transportation, no more function, no more money transfers until this man has been charged with the crime of treason. State treason. There is nothing left. There is no alternative. He cannot write enough letters to back out of this position. No compromise, no excuses, no quarter-assed, and none given. America, New York, stand up. Speak out, even when your voice trembles and shakes with fear. Acceptance and silence are the same thing in the eyes of the law. Your acquiescence to this is your agreement. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Google and how this particular governor, while in the throes of publicly announcing his fascism, overrules his own city assessors and lowers Google's real estate taxes by $21 million. Unbelievable. All right, make sure that you visit our sponsors over at the Battery Station. You can find them at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains. You can reach them by phone at 417-257-7799. You can also find them on the web at batterystation.com. Outstanding organization. Make sure that you tell each of our supporters and our advertisers when you patronize them that you heard about them on America's Voice Now. You can find the law offices of Jason Henry right on the Court Square in West Plains. He handles state and federal legal and criminal cases. You can reach him at 417-256-4100. He is a very, very good attorney. You can also, while you're there, slip into Wits End Classic Barbershop and get yourself a good haircut for $10. You can get a hot towel shave with a straight razor as well. And Jason is a fine, upstanding young man who is a true patriot for this nation. While you're there, you can slip into the Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop right behind the barbershop, where you can find cigars and tobacco and accessories and everything related to smoking. You can even have a cigar inside there and sit down and chat with some other like-minded individuals. You can reach them at 417-257-1776. They can also ship accoutrements and accessories to you, and cigars for that matter. Make sure that you visit our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains. They have a great lunch special available every day, and you can have both pizza and a salad bar there and a pasta bar. On Tuesday evening, they have family night where children under 12 eat free. I encourage you to go visit them, and when you get in there, just ask to see the manager, Bruce. Call him over to your table and say, Bruce, I want to thank you for supporting and sponsoring America's Voice Now. It's a great show, and I'm appreciative that you would take the time and put forth your effort and your money to support that program. Even if you don't go in there because you're too far away to enter and visit with any of our or patronize any of our sponsors, by all means, please feel free to give them a call and just let them know that you appreciate them for sponsoring AVN. All right, when we return, we're going to talk about this issue of Google. I mean, Google needs a $21 million tax break. You got to be kidding me, folks. Really? Has the world turned upside down and all the rules, all the laws of nature and physics disappeared? I think so. You're listening to America's Voice. We'll be back in just a moment. All right. Folks, you can find America's Voice Now all over the web. You can find us on 99.3 Big Country 99 in South Central Missouri. You can find us on Patriot Radio. You can find us on patriotfacebook.com. That's patriotfb.com. Make sure that you visit over there and register in. It's like a Facebook for patriots. You'll find a ton of like-minded citizens and freedom lovers over there where you'll be free of the censorship and the nonsense of the standard Facebook. I encourage you to begin to coordinate with other like-minded individuals, both within your communities, within your immediate circle of influence, and wherever you live, with folks within your churches, within your schools, with individuals that are in your personal circle of influence, but also on a regional and a national basis. One of the ways that you can do that is by getting onto Patriot FB. That's Patriot F like Foxtrot, B like Bravo. While you're there are a number of other radio programs that are offered, not just America's Voices on there, but there's a number of other radio programs that are available to you. And I strongly encourage you to listen to some of them because they are instructive and they are valuable to you as a source of alternative media where you can gain information and insight. J.J. McCartney has Conservative Junction Radio, and that is a program where you're going to get a lot of insight into not only what's happening here, but a religious perspective of how the nation is kind of slipping away from us. Patriot Radio is available 24 hours a day, and it's a news, talk, and sport and music program. My program plays there in the morning live, but after that, they've got music until J.J. McCartney comes on, and then after that, the Midnight Patriot comes on Monday through Friday from 9 p.m. until 12 midnight. Now, Jeff Norton is the host of the Midnight Patriot, and it is an absolutely outstanding show. I can't not encourage you enough to participate and listen to that program. Here's the cool part. On Patriot FB, after you've jumped on there, even if you've missed a show, all of us are podcasting our shows right there. So you can simply jump on to Patriot FB, and at any given time, if there's not a live show on, you can simply click over on the icons on the right. And you can listen to J.J. McCartney's program. You can listen to AVN's program. You can listen to the Midnight Patriot. You can listen to Restoring America Radio, which is put on by Donna Fiducia, and great folks. Now, the idea here is that you should be trying to find alternative media solutions so that you are not embedded in the propaganda that is being shoved down your throat every day by the mainstream ministry of propaganda. And that is exactly how I refer to them. They brook no other example or name. It is literally, folks, the mainstream ministry of propaganda. There's no denying it. And for the record, for those of you who don't know, the federal government has lifted the Smith-Mundt law that barred the federal government from utilizing propaganda against U.S. citizens only 6 or 8 months ago. So the question is, what are you listening to? What are you hearing? Are you hearing a standard dialogue and a litany of propaganda when you're watching CNN, faux news, MSLSD, ABC, CBS, NBC? When you are listening to the NPR, you're listening to a litany of propaganda, government-sponsored. Have you noticed that these people don't do investigative journalism? All they do is take an article or a press release issued to them by government. They reiterate it. They comment on it. But they don't do any background underlying investigative reporting to dig up underneath it. Now look, I do the same thing in terms of commentary on these stories. But I'm not an organization that's worth billions of dollars and has literally thousands of people working for it. If I did, I would have journalists out there, and my statement to them would be, if you don't come back with an investigative report, don't come back at all. Where is the true reporting? For the record, I did an interview the other day, which I'll shortly put up on both our podcast and our YouTube and so forth, in reference to the Journal Sentinel's Watchdog Report. Now, this was a report that was put out by John Dietrich and Raquel Rutledge in Milwaukee about the ATF's Milwaukee Sting operation that was not marred by mistake. Well, according to the title of the article, is marred by mistakes and failures. But worse than that, ladies and gentlemen, they actually committed crimes. They allowed young, underage individuals to smoke marijuana in their presence, and they actually furnished them, underage children, with alcohol. They lost a fully automatic machine gun during the operation. And there's not been a single, the level of criminal activity on the part of the ATF is so heinous that the individuals involved in that should have been charged with crimes themselves. There are investigative reporters out there. I can tell you right now that John Dietrich and Raquel Rutledge are among that very, very limited few. Cheryl Atkinson, her own station doesn't want her doing the investigations on Obamacare and Benghazi. There are a few, but I got to tell you, it's a significant, minor minority. And I, for one, have had it. Every one of us needs to send a message to the mainstream ministry of propaganda that we are not willing to sit here and accept the lies and the propaganda fed to us every single day. Google, one of the world's wealthiest corporations, has a headquarters in New York. It's a 17-story former Port Authority building that takes up an entire block in the Chelsea real estate market in New York. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Manhattan, Chelsea is one of the hottest markets right now. It's a yuppie heaven. And the properties in New York are so expensive and the tax revenues are so high that, when you look at an apartment in New York, a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan, one bedroom, one bath, and a galley-style kitchen and a little teeny tiny living room. You're talking about an apartment that might be no more than 600 to 700 square feet. Rents for a staggering $2,000 to $5,000 a month. Google spent $1.8 billion to buy this building. And the city finance department has overruled their own property assessors twice in the past 2 years to lower their real estate taxes as much as $21 million. You've got to be kidding me. A city that is on the edge of financial dissolution, that is that is bankrupt, where the governor has come out and made a declaratory statement that he only represents people who have a political ideology in line with his, that if you are pro-gun, that if you are pro-life, that if you are anti-gay, you are not welcome in New York, and there is no place for you. And the city goes out and says, here's a $21 million tax break. What does that mean? Well, it defines fascism. Fascism is the merger of corporate interests and politics. When politicians have been bought and sold to do the bidding of a corporatocracy, when politicians have been bribed, you can call it donations, but it is a bribery, ladies and gentlemen. And frankly, we need to change the language mentality of what's being done in our nation. No more should we use the term lobbying. We must say bribery/lobby. Don't make the mistake of saying lobbying/bribery. Use the term bribery first. When you accept bribery, I mean lobbying, sir, do you not feel as if you have an obligation to do the bidding of your new master? They change the language every day. In fact, the governor of New York made a statement that clearly changed the language. He stated very, very emphatically that extreme conservatives, right to life, pro-assault weapon, and anti-gay individuals are not welcome. There is no place for them in the state of New York. Why am I picking on New York? Because the same things are happening in California. Perhaps not with the same level of vehemence. But what I'm pointing out here is I want you to understand and recognize tyranny when it is standing in front of you. Despite all the propaganda that you're fed, despite all of the soft mentality and tyranny that you're fed that says, that's not what that means. They're attempting to redefine fascism into mainstream political thought. This is no different than you saw in Mussolini's Italy. This is no different than you saw in Stalin's Russia. This is no different than what you heard in Mein Kampf and fascist Germany from the likes of Hitler and Goebbels and his minions. This governor there is a declaration here. There is a tone and a tenor set by the highest level administrative officer in the state of New York. This is the same mindset that gave us the IRS being used as a weapon of mass destruction against conservatives on a federal level. This is the same mindset that has given us a federal government where the courts have been so corrupted that they have approved the scenario of Obamacare, which is unjustifiable in any true political discussion of liberty and freedom and constitutional law and rule of law. This is the kind of thing that every American, irrespective of your political beliefs and persuasions, should not only be up in arms about. The entire nation should be on strike. And New York State should cease all activity until Google is properly assessed and this governor is removed for a crime of treason against his own state. When you've got 3 veterans in their tax assessment finance department who claim highly unusual, this is their quote, not mine, highly unusual interventions in the assessment process of Google's property, you have to recognize it for what it is. I'm not saying that that's empirical proof. I'm saying that at some point in time, America must come to the realization and the acknowledgement, quite honestly, that there is so much overwhelming circumstantial evidence that the United States of America has now fallen to police state status, to fascistic status, that we can no longer ignore the obvious. We can no longer stand on the sidelines and say there is political change in the wings, and the winds of change will turn this around. There is someone who will ride up and become that which we all seek, a leader of objectivity and respect. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not going to happen. There will be no leader who will step up and say, I'm going to run for president. I'm going to run for governor. And I'm making a commitment now to live under the strictures of the Constitution. Not in this political environment. It's not possible. They don't have the money, and the parties will do everything in their power to destroy that potential candidate long before they ever have an opportunity to become effective. I point you to Ron Paul, a man who, for all intents and purposes, may well have actually won some of the major issues surrounding the election that was ultimately put in the hands of Mitt Romney as the candidate of choice. But was he really? The media worked cooperatively, hand in hand, with the party to make sure that Ron Paul was not a known, recognized name as a valid and legitimate contender. They took every opportunity to deride him, to belittle and reduce his effectiveness in the public eye. I don't really care whether or not you think Ron Paul was a good candidate. My point is, it's not up to government and the parties and the press to make that decision on your behalf. You have a right to make that decision for yourself. And when you can't, when you're prohibited, then you are no longer free. When your free will is usurped, how can we sit here in good conscience and say that our elections are fair and objective? How can we sit here in good conscience and say the people in play truly and accurately represent us? They cannot, they do not. This is only a microcosm of the examples that are pervasive throughout the entire nation. In my state, in Missouri, we have a governor who has just accomplished in the last session to become the most overridden governor by a state assembly in history. And yet, he rules the roost. He's implemented Common Core without even approaching the legislature, without even approaching them and asking their permission. He did it, and now he goes back and says, now I need the money to pay for it. He's declared, under an executive order the other day, that he will use and utilize the National Guard for drug enforcement operations within the state. Ladies and gentlemen, where's the press? Where's the media? Have you heard that? Did you know that the city of Springfield, Missouri, has signed an open memorandum of understanding with the National Guard to allow the National Guard to be used for drug enforcement service? People, this is a police state growing right underneath your feet. And I recognize that most Americans don't want to acknowledge it because acknowledgement requires some kind of corrective action on our behalf. It requires some response from us. I dare say, what are you going to tell your children and your grandchildren? You did when tyranny raised its head and took over the nation that they are stuck with. What will you say? What will be your claim? What will be your defense? Do you have one? This isn't just an American issue. We're seeing this same level of abuse and oppression on a global scale. Yesterday, I talked about Ullman, who has written that without a major intervention and a catastrophic, to use his term, an extraordinary crisis is required to clamp down on freedom. And he's not talking about just in the United States. His point was, with the advent of the internet and alternative media, millions are becoming aware that they have already got one shackle on, and the second one is about to be clicked shut. In the Ukraine, there's fighting in the streets because the president refuses to do what the will of his people demand. It's happening everywhere, people. The media is not telling you about it because they don't want you to know. They don't want your conviction that things are wrong to be reinforced by evidence and examples all around us. They seek to keep censoring that which would confirm your greatest and deepest fears. And that in and of itself is a tyrannical step. Who owns the media? Why is it, excuse me, I'm still trying to get my voice back. Why is it we cannot have a media that is willing to tell the truth? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the 85 richest people in the world who own the equivalent of what 3.5 billion people on the planet call their net worth. Please make sure that you visit our sponsors. You can find the law offices of Jason Henry at number 10 Court Square. You can call him at 417-256-4100. He will shortly have a brand new website. 417-256-4100. State and federal criminal issues, as well as family law for divorces and that type of thing, as well as cases relating to personal injury for automobile accidents. You can find our friends over at Battery Station at batterystation.com. You can call them at 417-257-7799. 417-257-7799. Pizza Hut over on Porter Wagoner Boulevard, and they have a special a lunch buffet every day. Tuesday night, kids under 12 eat free. Patriot Cigar and Tobacco at 417-257-1776. 417-257-1776. And while you're there visiting them, make sure that you slip into Wits End Classic Barbershop, get yourself a shave and a haircut. Outstanding people that are willing to step up and support America's Voice Now. Please make sure that you let them know you heard about it right here on America's Voice Now. Thanks to those friends over at 99.3, Big Country 99, for carrying AVN. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a few moments, and when we do, we're going to talk about this, discuss this issue of how 85 individuals can have the equivalent net worth of 3.5 billion people, and what that tells us.
It's It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I am your host this morning. You are joining us in the second half of our program. The theme of today's show is we are basically descending into fascism and tyranny. And in our first segment, we talked about New York Governor Cuomo's declaration of open tyranny on the state of New York and the individuals within. Because he made an open, declared statement that if you are a pro-gun, pro-life, or anti-gay individual, and that is your political philosophy, that for all intents and purposes, you have no place in New York. And I'm putting out a call right here, right now, to every New Yorker, state or city, that the governor should be charged with a crime of state treason. That's right. It's a high crime when you have declared that the constituents within your state are not represented accurately, and it is a hate crime to use that level of language in an attempt to destroy their standing as equal citizens. Our second segment, we talked about how the city of New York has overruled its own finance departments in a highly unusual intervention in order to provide Google with a $21 million tax break in a city that is bankrupt and scrambling to try to figure out where they can obtain enough money to provide basic services. On a $1.8 billion building that Google bought in 2010. This segment, we're going to talk about the 85 richest people in the world. This is an article out of the LA Times. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be linked in the segment, in the discussion or the comment section. The 85 richest people have a net worth equal to the entire bottom half of the population of the planet. And since there are approximately 7 billion people on the planet, that means that there are 85 individuals who have a net worth that is equal to 3.5 billion people. Now, I'm a capitalist. But I'm not a capitalist when we talk about the version of capitalism, of interventionist capitalism, that we practice today. Here's the problem. This study found that the richest 1% of all of the people on the planet, which is, let's see, I don't know exactly what that number would be, but some, 70 million people? Or 170 million people? Let me see, I did some math on it earlier. Yeah, 70 million. Some 70 million people have the entire asset value of 46% of all the wealth on the planet. In other words, this study, which was done by Oxfam, determined that 1%, or this 70 million, or this group of 70 million individuals, has the net worth of $110 trillion in wealth. You see, if you want to know who our tyrants are, it's these individuals. These are the individuals who are staggeringly wealthy, beyond the comprehension of virtually 95% of the planet. And these are the people who are influencing government, politicians, and are forcing and utilizing the police power of governments to achieve their own ends and agendas. They call it inequality, but it isn't really inequality. That's a euphemism for tyrannical fascism. It's inequality using the police power of government to accomplish that. How can I make a statement like that? Well, let's understand something. These individuals, especially here in the United States, but globally as well, didn't reach this level of wealth because they're actually that much smarter, that much faster on their feet, that much luckier than the rest of us. What they did do is utilize their wealth to buy their way to a position where government is passing laws and regulations that benefit them individually and exclusively. And that, ladies and gentlemen, means that they have a significantly large unfair advantage over the teeming minions beneath them, the peasantry. Now, this report goes on to make some statements. It says, it is staggering that in the 21st century, half the world's population own no more than a tiny elite whose numbers could all sit comfortably in a single train carriage. Widening inequality is creating a vicious circle where wealth and power are increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few, leaving the rest of us to fight over crumbs from the top table. Now, here's the problem. A report like this should be read from an objective perspective, from someone with critical thinking skills, to understand exactly what it's telling us and reading between the lines. And yet, you've got in the next breath, they report here, President Obama recently called the expanding gap between rich and poor a bigger threat to the U.S. economy than the budget deficit. And now he will utilize a report like this to go out there and create even more tyrannical laws that will only reinforce exactly what this has accomplished, or the whole issue here. The percentage of income held by the 1% of the richest U.S. Or individuals in the U.S. has grown by 150% since 1980. And moreover, this 1%, which for all intents and purposes, right, our population is 315 million. So it's roughly 3 million individuals. And that small elite has managed to aggregate 95% of all the wealth created since 2009. Let's understand what that means, folks. 3 million people in the United States alone have aggregated and been the recipients of 95% of all the wealth developed in the United States of America since 2009. You can't tell me, you cannot justify, rationalize, or pretend that that level of imbalance did not come about with the help, the support, and quite frankly, the direction and the enforcement by and for government. You see, monopolies can only be created by government. In a true free market, there is no such thing as a monopoly. It does not exist. They only exist because government passes regulations and rules that force monopolies to be accepted, that enable monopolies to exist. In a true free market, there is no such thing as a monopoly because someone, somewhere, will figure out a way to come up with that same product faster, better, cheaper, and will steal the market share away. But when government gives an interest, the ability to declare that they are the sole source, the sole supplier, monopolies are created. When government chooses our winners and our losers, we don't have a free market. When government subsidizes the income or the investment of a selected and chosen few, those few turn around and pay back those self-same politicians, enabling them to retain and continue in power. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's a vicious cycle that has nothing to do with income inequality in the perspective of the average worker versus the corporation. What it does have to do with is individuals who are, for all intents and purposes, allied with government and buying their agendas. Government has become the police force for a corporatocracy out of control. And there's no mistaking it, folks. We're talking about a concentration of wealth in the hands of a few that is so great. How do you justify the receipt of 95% of all wealth created since 2009 in no more than 3 million people? 3 million people who, they're not the ones who are out there building something creative or functional. They're not the ones who are out there producing something. They're the likes of these people in Google and the likes of the people in other, for all intents and purposes, that Zuckerberg from Facebook and groups like that. Are they really generating something that does or improves or provides a benefit for the nation as a whole? I mean, when we talk about somebody like Schmidt from Google, the guy is worth untold billions. When we talk about Zuckerberg, it's the same deal. I don't care how many jobs Facebook produces. When that wealth is accumulated in the hands of 3 million individuals, and it is equivalent to 95% of all of the wealth generated, produced, and created since 2009. The last 5 years, 95% of all the wealth has been siphoned, funneled, directed, focused in the hands of 3 million individuals. That means, ladies and gentlemen, that the other 312 million of us got to share the remaining 5%. You cannot tell me that that is because these individuals are so brilliant or so astute or such sharp marketers, or that they've created something that was so valuable to society that it warrants or merits that level of income. What we have, and you know, all of these things I bring out to you are only meant to be examples of the tyranny that we are allowing to grow under our own feet right here, right now, as we are speaking, as you're listening to this. The level of tyranny that is being instituted, the level of fascism. I want you to do yourself a favor. And I want you to understand, and so I'm not gonna try to explain to you what the definition of fascism is. You've heard me say it often enough. But I want you to do some homework and due diligence for yourself. I'm asking everyone who's listening to this program to literally go out and do some research on fascism and its origins. Not just its origins, but I want you to be thoroughly knowledgeable about the attributes that produce fascism and the attributes of fascism in its full-blown state. Because I believe that if you do that level of homework, you will be, one, in a better position to thoroughly utilize that information in helping to influence your own personal circle of influence, those people at your work, at your church, at your school, those people that are listening to reading your blog, listening to you. You see, as the leaders of a resurgence of liberty and freedom and patriotism, as the last defenders, we have an obligation to not be foot soldiers, but to be leaders. And each of us as a leader has an obligation to make sure that we are thoroughly understanding of our own enemy. Sun Tzu said it best. Know your enemy. And the enemy, ladies and gentlemen, the enemy here is not liberal progressives. The enemy here is not black or white. The enemy is not right to life versus pro-abortion. The enemy here is not legal versus illegal. The enemy here is not anything other than government fascistic tyranny. And it's being applied to us not only on a federal level, but on a state level, across the board. Every one of the 50 states, you can find an example that is growing and multiplying. Like a virus, like a cancer. You see, this is a tumor in our nation. And it's a tumor that's growing at an alarming rate. It's not just something that we can deal with in a few years. With all due respect, I would submit to you that time is up, that our nation has left and lost the ability for us to wait for someone else to solve these issues. I don't believe that there is any time left. And I don't believe that there are political solutions looming on our horizon. I don't believe that we're going to see a solution in 2016 with a presidential election. Because both parties are complicit and participatory. There's no denying that fact, ladies and gentlemen. None. You think the representative that claims to represent your district or your precinct or your community or your state is doing something to fight back against this tyranny? I declare that's not true. I declare that they are part of it, and they are just better disguised. Or you are wearing blinders related to their performance. I declare that the media is intentionally and willfully participating in a coup of the United States of America. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Kelly Thomas. Because this is a guy who was murdered and it should be a symbol to our nation of what a police state really truly looks like. Our law enforcement is also complicit and participatory in where our nation is going. Tyranny is best exemplified when you have a first-hand example. And I'm telling you right now, I don't think you can find a better example than Kelly Thomas. Make sure that you support and visit our friends and our sponsors. The Battery Station over at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains. You can find them at the batterystation.com. Just plain batterystation.com. You can call them at 417-257-7799. You can also find our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard. You can go on in there, and when you do, I'd like you to call the manager, Bruce, over to your table. Ask the server to have the manager swing over there. And I'd just like you to shake his hand and say, thank you for supporting America's Voice. They have a great lunch special, and then on Tuesday night, you can bring your family in and your kids under 12 will eat free. Make sure that you see Jason Henry if you've got any kind of legal issue going on, whether it be state or federal. You can reach him at 417-256-4100. He's on the square in West Plains. Make sure that you see our friends over at the Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop. They can be reached at 417-257-1776 with every accessory you can be interested in for cigars, pipes, and tobacco products. They have a great little lounge there where you can go in and have a cigar with a couple of like-minded folks. And then while you're there, you can swing outside that and slip into the barbershop and get yourself a haircut and a hot lather shave. Wits End Classic Barbershop. Okay, folks, we're going to take a break. I got to tell you, this next topic we're going to talk about with Mr. Thomas here is so disturbing. I've posted the video up there, which shows the entire murder, and you owe it to yourself to spend a half hour watching it. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now. All right. Forgive me, but I am still trying to shake this, the effects of this cold and losing my voice. It's been a struggle, and it's really been difficult to hold a conversation without sounding like you're growling all the time. I mean, I am a growler anyway. And that's just the way it is. But, so, okay. I want to talk to you about the case of Kelly Thomas. Because this is an existing example. Is that in the sense that when we are living in a state of tyranny, it's instructive for us to see an example of that so that we have a taste of what is coming. And I've loaded the video up on our website at americasvoicenow.org. I've loaded it up on our Facebook page at facebook.com/americasvoicenow. I'll put it in the comments section or the subject section in our YouTube channel, and I've put it up on our patriotfb.com page. This is disturbing because it shows two police officers who approach a guy who's homeless. Apparently, and you can see in the video, the guy's wearing no shirt. He's got a knapsack on. He's got long, scraggly hair. He looks awful. He's dirty and unkempt. But they're questioning him. And what it looks like as as it unfolds, the first 14 minutes or so is these officers, basically talking to him and toying with him. And as time goes on in that 14 minutes, you see the police officers, and this one police officer specifically, his name is Manny Ramos, who is a murderer, who will, if there is any justice in the universe, will spend the remainder of his natural life, hopefully as short as that may be, and the remainder of eternity in utter and sheer horror and torment. I don't think there is enough punishment for a piece of human trash like Manny Ramos and the other cop. The cop keeps telling him, put your feet out and put your hands behind your back. And the premise, of course, after they forced him to sit on the curb. And the guy is complicit and compliant. And then finally the cop walks up to him and he says to him, put your hands on your knees and put your feet out. And then he looks at this guy and he's standing over him, and it reminds me of a cat that has, a mouse. You've seen this in your own yard. And this cat has the mouse. And it picks it up and it throws it up in the air, and the mouse lands on the ground and tries to scramble away. And the cat, with one or two steps, reaches over and paws him, holds him down on the ground with a paw, and then lets him up so he can run away a little bit and they can toy with him. And the mouse and the mouse is terrified and frightened, and you can see his sides heaving while the cat continues to play. And then finally, the cat grows tired of the game and has his meal. And you can see this in play in a human caricature as this cop, Manny Ramos, steps up. And he's putting rubber gloves on, and he says to this guy, now you see my fists? And you can clearly hear this in the video. Yeah, what about them, says Thomas. They're getting ready to F you up, says Ramos. Now, as he's putting on a pair of gloves, if a man had you sitting on the ground, for all intents and purposes, the kid is not armed. They already know that. He's 160 pounds, and Ramos looks like he at least weighs 250. And when anyone who's ever been in a fight, a physical confrontation, and any woman who's listening now, if you were sitting there and you were, for all intents and purposes, knowing that you were under authority and that this individual was literally terrorizing you at this point, and that person says to you, you see these fists? Well, they're getting ready to blank you up. The alarm flags are going off in your head. Your adrenaline is surging because you know this is that moment. You know that go is reaching go. And this guy says, well, start punching. And he never once displayed any kind of aggressive response. Never once did he even put his hands up to defend himself. And the cop tells him to get on his knees, and he doesn't say get on your knees. It's laced with language. And the guy stands up, and the cop pulls out his billy club. And the minute this guy sees that club, he knows what's coming. And he attempts to get away. Now, you have to recognize this has been going on for 15 minutes now. And maybe even sooner than that, longer than that, because this is a city surveillance camera that caught the entire thing. And you can hear the language. You can hear the words spoken. But then it gets worse. These cops break after this guy and get him just on the other side of the car, 15, 20 feet away. And they hammer him to the ground. And they're telling him to lay still. As you can see, this cop has his arm bent up behind his back, and he's jamming this guy's arm up so hard the guy's screaming in agony. They keep telling him, put his hands behind his back. And he says, I can't. The guy is begging them, I'm sorry. He's telling them, I can't breathe. They're sitting on him. More cops run up. 6 men. And at one point, you can hear the tasers going off. And the guy is screaming in agony. And then you see an officer raise his hand, and he starts banging down with something. And you can't tell whether he later said it was the handle of the taser. I don't believe that. It looked like a flashlight or something. You can even hear the cop later on say, I beat his face in with the taser. And when you look at this man who never awoke, but spent a week in the hospital and died, folks, look at the picture of this man and look at his face. Look at his physical condition and tell me anything he could have done warranted that level of treatment. Are you telling me that 6 burly cops with body armor and physical mace and tasers could not control this man? All the time they're saying, he's on something. He wasn't on anything. He was fighting valiantly for his life. When your life is in danger, have you ever seen a dog or a cat or any animal for that matter that has been cornered and realizes this is my last stand? That animal will fight viciously and savagely, irrespective of how mild and moderate their temperament may be, when they recognize that their life is about to end. It took these cops 14 minutes to kill this man. He was tortured and he was murdered by thugs in blue. The toxicology reports later came out and said he had no drugs and no alcohol in his system. He was merely fighting for his life. You'll hear the guy begging, telling them repeatedly, I can't breathe, crying for his father as he lay dying. You hear one of the police officers at one point say, "He's falling asleep." He wasn't falling asleep. He was dying. They taunted him like a cat with a mouse under his paw. To make things worse, ladies and gentlemen, it is now institutionalized into our system that police cannot be found guilty of murder. These two individuals, the two police involved, were fired. And they were charged with murder. And the jury found them not guilty after watching the same video I'm asking you to watch. The judge made the statement that, among other lessons we've learned in this trial, violence begets violence. I don't see violent actions on the part of Kelly Thomas. I don't see him fighting back. I merely see him trying to defend himself. Their police union lawyer represented these guys, and here's what he has to say. These peace officers did their jobs. They did what they were trained to do. And that individual has no idea how damning that statement is. Because he's right. They did exactly as they've been trained to do. They are doing exactly as they are trained to do in every instance of police brutality. In every instance where you see the militarization of law enforcement, it was unprovoked. It is completely and utterly unjustified, and it was murder. The Fullerton Police Department fired these two guys, and the state saw enough evidence that they felt it was appropriate to charge them criminally with murder. A jury acquitted them. Right after the acquittal, one of the cops actually went back and started to cry out that he wants his job back. He will likely be rehired. In a summation to the jury, one of the attorneys who represented this cop, Cincinnati, he stated that the unremitting assault on Thomas was carried out in strict fidelity to the training that officers had received. He says, the officer has the right to pursue the suspect until the suspect is controlled. That's how my client was trained. This explains Cincinnati's use of a taser, first as a taser and secondly as a club. And it justifies his own words, in which he said, on tape, I smashed his face to hell. Ladies and gentlemen, a clearer case of police brutality and abuse suffered at the hands of a tyrannical, fascist police state does not exist. And yet, this will be, and I promise you this will be, used as precedent in future cases in which law enforcement will continue this raping and pillaging of America. The citizens that they are allegedly sworn to protect and serve. When you watch this, I got to tell you, put yourself in the place of a jury. You know, one of their defenders actually sat there and says, listen to them during the fight. You don't think they thought they were in the fight of their lives? Do you think that they called a bunch of cops there to come watch them and help them beat down a homeless person? Do you think that's what happened? Well, I'm asking you to watch it, and you tell me what you think. Ladies and gentlemen, the citizens of Fullerton deserve better. The truth of the matter is, we deserve better from our law enforcement than terror. I've reiterated numerous cases of abuse and terrorism at the hands of law enforcement in this show. And I don't want to throw every police officer and every sheriff's deputy and every law enforcement agent under the bus here. There are those who do their job in a true constitutional fashion. But the institutions themselves have now left the realm of constitutional law. They have left the realm of the principles of protect and serve. And they have entered the realm of tyrannical terrorism by... And you know, when you talk to police, they'll defend it and say, look, there's bad cops, but, you know, the vast majority are... I got to tell you, I'm not so sure that that's the case anymore. I'm not sure it's the vast majority who are actually good, and there's a few bad ones, or if it's the vast majority that are bad, and there's only a few good ones. When I look at an organization like the TSA, when I look at an organization like the ATF, when I look at an organization that, like these cops who are defended and protected, I got to tell you, folks, it tells me that when push comes to shove, we can't expect these people to protect and serve us. It tells me that we no longer have the ability to realistically expect that law enforcement will protect us, because we almost at this point need more protection from them than we do from the remainder of whatever threats are out there. The family of this young man, Kelly Thomas, I got to tell you, to watch these two men walk off out of a courtroom, if I had watched that as a father, and I watched them do that to my son, and then I heard a jury give them not freedom, but accolades and acclaim for that behavior. There would be no place safe on the planet Earth if that was my boy And I heard him begging, "Daddy, please help me." I watched that video this morning and I couldn't stop the tears from running down my face. Because I have sons. And I placed myself in the position of that young fella's father. And there would be no justification for their actions. This is so far beyond the scope of anything that anyone can justify. I don't know how they picked this jury. I don't know who they paid to come in and defend these men. I don't know how they accomplished what they accomplished. But I can tell you that for these two to get off means that there is not a single shred of justice in the world, in the United States at least, that are, I heard that the Department of Justice is going to look into this and determine whether or not they should charge these people separately under federal crime. And if they don't, I won't be surprised. But I've got to tell you, this was a crime of unimaginable terror. When you watch the 15 minutes it took for these men to murder that young fella, and there's no justice. I don't care what he did. I don't care what they think he did. I don't care whether he smelled. I don't care whether he was dirty. When you see the picture of his face as he lay in that hospital bed dying, and you see the damage they did to him, I'm without words. I'm without words. He's pleading for his life. And they murdered him. I don't know how you move on from here. I don't know how this father can wake up every day and go on knowing what happened to his son. It's so painful to watch that video and to recognize what we have descended to. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to judge for yourselves. I want you to use the principles of natural law, the idea that you have freedom and liberty as a base foundational human attribute. And then I want you to tell me after watching that if there's anything that justifies their actions. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. Good day.